Imagine this. You are a 9-year-old boy sitting at a dusty kitchen table, caught between two titanic forces that will shape the very fabric of your destiny. On one side stands your biological father, a brilliant PhD, a pillar of the educational establishment, a man who believes that the path to dignity is paved with gold stars, higher grades, and the cold security of a government paycheck. On the other stands your best friend's father, a man who never finished the 8th grade, a high school dropout with the calloused hands of a laborer but the piercing, predatory eyes of a visionary. One man whispers of the safety of a stable job, while the other bellows about the freedom of owning the company. This is the crucible in which Robert Kiyosaki was forged. A tale of two fathers that serves as the ultimate indictment of modern education system that produces world-class employees but financial illiterates. The narrative begins with a simple, desperate question from a child: "Dad, can you tell me how to get rich?" The poor dad, representing the collective wisdom of the middle class, offers the standard script: go to school, get good grades, and find a safe job. But the rich dad offers something far more dangerous and far more valuable: a seat at the table of reality. The story follows the two young boys, Robert and Mike, as they attempt to make money by literally melting down lead toothpaste tubes to forge their own nickels, a crude, innocent attempt at alchemy that their poor dad finds amusing but their rich dad finds profoundly significant. He sees in them the raw spark of the entrepreneur, the refusal to wait for a handout, and he decides to put them through a training that no university could ever replicate. He hires them to work in his convenience stores for 10 cents an hour, a wage so insulting that it triggers the first great psychological crisis of the boy's life. The analysis of this early trauma reveals the master lesson of the wealthy, the poor and the middle class work for money, but the rich have money work for them. Most people are driven by two primal, unrefined emotions: fear and greed. The fear of being without money drives them to work harder, and once they get that paycheck, greed or desire leads them to think of all the wonderful things they can buy. This sets the stage for a lifelong pattern known as the rat race. They wake up, go to work, pay bills. Wake up, go to work, pay bills. Their lives are forever governed by two emotions, fear and greed. Offer them more money, and they simply increase their spending by increasing their debt. This is why educated people often struggle financially. They have been trained to be masters of a profession but slaves to a paycheck. The narrative captures the intensity of the moment when the boy realizes that his anger at the low wage is actually his first lesson in financial literacy. The rich dad tells him that if he can learn to master his emotions and see beyond the immediate need for a paycheck, he will see opportunities that others miss. He stops paying the boys altogether, forcing them to work for free, a move that pushes their young minds into an agonizing state of necessity. It is in this void of no pay that the boys discover their first real business, a comic book library made from discarded covers. They weren't working for money, they were creating an asset that worked for them. As the story progresses, the divergence between the two fathers becomes a chasm. The poor dad, the learned man, views the home as his greatest asset, while the rich dad views it as a liability. This is the moment where the narrative introduces the most revolutionary concept in personal finance, the difference between an asset and a liability. To the world of the poor dad, anything of value is an asset. But to the rich dad, an asset is only something that puts money in your pocket, and a liability is something that takes money out. The storytelling becomes a visual dissection of a financial statement. We see the poor dad's life as a series of arrows pointing out of his pocket: mortgages, car loans, credit card debt, all fueled by a salary that is taxed before he even sees it. We see the rich dad's life as a garden of assets: stocks, bonds, real estate, intellectual property, arrows pointing into his pocket, growing silently while he sleeps. The psychological weight of this realization is immense. It suggests that most of what we have been taught to value is actually a tether, binding us to a desk for 40 years. The analysis here is clear: intelligence is not about how much money you make, it is about how much money you keep, and how many generations you keep it for. Financial aptitude starts with the ability to read and understand the story told by numbers. If you cannot read the numbers, You cannot tell the difference between a golden opportunity and a gilded cage. The narrative intensifies as it follows the boys into adolescence, where the rich dad begins to teach them about the power of corporations. This is portrayed as the ultimate legal secret of the wealthy. The story describes how the rich use corporations to protect their assets and minimize their taxes, a concept that the poor dad finds ethically questionable but the rich dad finds essential for survival. He explains that the rich don't own things in their own names, they control them through legal entities. This allows them to earn money, spend it on business expenses, and only pay taxes on what is left. In contrast, the poor and middle class earn money, get taxed immediately, and then try to live on what is left. This part of the script is a harrowing look at the tax trap, where the more successful the poor dad becomes, the more he is punished by a system designed to extract wealth from those who trade time for money. The lesson learned is that financial IQ is a synergy of 4 technical skills: accounting, the ability to read numbers; investing, the science of money making money; understanding markets, the science of supply and demand; and the law, the awareness of tax advantages and protection. Without all 4, you are a beast of burden for the government and the banks. The storytelling then pivots to the self-imposed prison of the middle class, the desire for security. The poor dad constantly preaches the virtue of a good, stable job. But the rich dad reveals that job security is an illusion. He tells the story of how large corporations are not loyal to their employees, they are loyal to their shareholders. He encourages Robert to mind your own business. This does not mean quitting your job immediately, but it means spending your spare time building an asset column rather than just working for your boss's asset column. The intensity of this segment lies in the realization that your profession is what you do for 40 hours a week, but your business is what you do for yourself. Most people spend their lives working for everyone else, the company, the government, and the bank, leaving nothing for themselves at the end of the day. The analysis here is a call to action, to stop being a consumer and start being a producer. It is about the shift from "I can't afford it" to "how can I afford it?" The first is a lie that shuts down the brain, the second is a question that opens the mind to infinite possibilities. As the boys grow older, the narrative explores the internal saboteurs that prevent most people from achieving wealth. These are not external enemies but the ghosts of our own psychology: fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance. The story describes the fear of losing money as the #1 reason people fail to get rich. The rich dad doesn't tell them that losing money is okay, he tells them that failure inspires winners and defeats losers. He points to the Alamo, a symbol of a great defeat that became a rallying cry for victory. The poor dad, fearing failure, plays it safe and thus guarantees a mediocre life. The rich dad, embracing the possibility of failure, plays to win. This part of the script is a visceral exploration of the Chicken Little syndrome, the cynics who are always screaming that the sky is falling. They see the risk in every deal but never the opportunity. They criticize the rich but never analyze the rich. The lesson is that cynicism is a mental parasite that feeds on fear. To be wealthy, one must learn to analyze, not criticize. The story moves toward the final realization that wealth is a choice made every single day with every single dollar. Each dollar that enters your hand is a seed, and you are the farmer. You can eat the seed, consumption, or you can plant it, investment. The choice is yours, and the consequences are eternal. The transition into the next stage of the journey is marked by the boy's increasing independence, as he begins to apply these dangerous lessons in the real world. Facing the ridicule of his poor dad and the high-stakes pressure of the rich dad's expectations, the tension is no longer about learning the theory, it is about surviving the practice. The narrative will now follow Robert into adulthood, where he must test these principles in the cold, hard arena of business and real estate, discovering that the greatest obstacle to wealth is not the lack of money, but the lack of courage to be different. The narrative shifts from the innocence of childhood lessons to the high-stakes arena of adulthood, where Robert finds himself standing on a precipice, forced to put the rich dad's theories to the ultimate test. The year is 1974, and Robert has just returned from the Vietnam War. He is a decorated pilot, a man of discipline and courage. Yet he finds himself at a crossroads that will define the rest of his life. His poor dad, ever the advocate for institutional security, urges him to take a stable job with the government or a large corporation, a path that promises a pension and a steady climb up the ladder. But the rich dad's voice echoes in his mind, warning him that the ladder is leaning against the wrong wall. The story follows Robert as he makes a decision that shocks his academic father. He takes a job at the Xerox Corporation. He doesn't take the job for the benefits or the salary, he takes it because he is terrified of people. He knows that to be rich he must master the art of sales. And Xerox has one of the best training programs in the world. This is the work to learn, not to earn principle in its most raw form. The storytelling captures the grueling intensity of those early years, the crushing weight of rejection, the cold sweat of door-to-door solicitation, and the humiliation of being at the bottom of the sales board. While his poor dad sees a man struggling in a lowly trade, his rich dad sees a man forging the psychological armor necessary for an empire. The analysis of this period reveals a fundamental shift in the definition of security. To the poor dad, security is a paycheck provided by someone else. To the rich dad, security is the ability to produce and the ability to sell. The lesson learned here is that most people remain one skill away from greatness. A brilliant writer remains poor because they cannot sell their books. A gifted chef fails because they cannot manage a business. The rich dad's philosophy is built on the synergy of skills, sales plus accounting plus investing plus law. The narrative emphasizes that the greatest asset is not the money earned at Xerox, but the communication skills and emotional intelligence developed through the fire of rejection. It is the realization that the world is full of smart people who are broke because they are too afraid of what others think to take a risk. The story intensifies as Robert begins to use his commission checks not to buy a new car or a bigger house, the standard middle-class trap, but to buy his first pieces of real estate. He is living a double life, an employee by day, an investor by night. The storytelling becomes a tense drama of financial discipline. We see Robert and his wife, Kim, living in a small, cramped apartment, driving an old car, while their peers are upgrading their lives with doodles, the luxury items that the middle class buys to look rich. The poor dad is confused, seeing his son's lack of material progress despite a high-paying job. But the rich dad is watching the asset column grow. The narrative describes the moment of escape, when the passive income from Robert's rental properties finally exceeds his monthly expenses. This is the end of the rat race. The psychological intensity of this moment is profound. It is the transition from survival to freedom. The analysis centers on the concept of paying yourself first. Most people get a paycheck and pay everyone else first, the landlord, the credit card company, the tax man, and then they try to invest what is left. Usually, nothing is left. The rich dad teaches that you must pay yourself first, even if you are short on bills. This healthy pressure forces the mind to find new ways to generate income, turning the struggle into a creative exercise rather than a soul-crushing burden. It is the ultimate test of financial character, as the narrative enters the final stages of Robert's apprenticeship. It tackles the 5 obstacles that act as the final gatekeepers to wealth. The story illustrates cynicism through the Chicken Littles who warned Robert that the Hawaii real estate market would crash, and laziness through the people who are too busy working for a paycheck to manage their own money. The most dangerous obstacle, however, is arrogance. The rich dad often said, "What I know makes me money. What I don't know loses me money." The storytelling describes how arrogance is often used to hide ignorance. When someone is arrogant, they stop learning. And when they stop learning, they begin to lose. The tension builds as Robert navigates through several market cycles, seeing his poor dad lose his job and his house due to a lack of financial flexibility, while his rich dad continues to thrive regardless of the economy. The contrast is heart-wrenching. One man who worked hard his whole life is left with nothing, while the other who worked smart has the world at his feet. The lesson is that life is a game of financial IQ, and the rules are different for the rich than they are for the poor. The story concludes with a powerful meditation on the spirit of wealth. The rich dad's final lesson is not about greed, but about giving. He teaches Robert that the more you give, the more you receive. The poor dad, living in a world of lack, believed he couldn't afford to give. The rich dad, living in a world of abundance, knew he couldn't afford not to. The analysis suggests that the true purpose of financial freedom is not the accumulation of things, but the ability to live a life of contribution and choice. The narrative brings us back to the image of the 9-year-old boy at the kitchen table. Realizing that the secret of the rich was never a secret at all, it was a choice. A choice to see the world as a place of infinite opportunity rather than a place of finite resources. The transition to the final synthesis is marked by Robert's decision to share these lessons with the world, creating the cash flow game and writing this very book to bridge the gap that the education system left behind. The story will now conclude with the final weight of the message, that your future is determined by what you do with your time and your money today. The final movement of this narrative odyssey brings us to the ultimate synthesis of a lifetime's worth of struggle and observation. The story follows Robert as he reaches the pinnacle of financial independence. A moment where the asset column he spent years painstakingly building begins to breathe with a life of its own. He is no longer the 9-year-old boy trying to melt lead, he is a man who has mastered the alchemy of the modern world. The storytelling captures a poignant, final contrast between the two men who shaped him. We see the poor dad, a man of immense intellect and public service, sitting in his twilight years, burdened by the weight of unpaid medical bills and a pension that barely covers the cost of existence. His eyes are filled with the bewilderment of someone who followed all the rules but was still betrayed by the game. On the other side of the island, the rich dad has passed away, but his presence is more powerful than ever. His legacy is not just the vast tracts of land or the commercial empires he left behind, but the financial DNA he implanted in his son and Mike. The intensity of this ending lies in the realization that wealth is not something you get, it is something you become. It is the culmination of thousands of tiny, daily decisions to choose the asset over the liability, the risk over the comfort, and the lesson over the paycheck. The analysis of this final stage centers on the power of choice. Every dollar that enters a person's hand is a vote for their future, a vote to be rich, poor, or middle class. The narrative emphasizes that the greatest liability of all is not a house or a car, but a closed mind. The poor dad's mind was closed by the arrogance of his education. He believed he was above the sordid world of money, and thus, money became his master. The rich dad's mind was open to the reality of the market, and thus, he became the master of money. The lesson learned is that the secret of the rich is simply the willingness to see the world as it is, rather than how we wish it to be. The story highlights the taxes of the middle class as the ultimate price of financial ignorance. By refusing to learn the rules of the wealthy, the average person spends nearly half of their life working for the government, while the rich use those same rules to build libraries, hospitals, and futures. The core message and meaning of Rich Dad Poor Dad is a radical call to financial sovereignty. Robert Kiyosaki intends to convey that the traditional path of study hard, get a good job is a 20th century solution to a 21st century problem. The book is a manifesto for the entrepreneurial spirit, teaching us that our greatest asset is our mind, and our greatest investment is our financial education. It reveals that the rat race is a choice, not a destiny, and that the exit ramp is paved with the courage to be different and the discipline to mind your own business. The story ends with a powerful, haunting vision of the two paths. One leads to a life of dependency and security that eventually fails, while the other leads to a life of uncertainty that eventually blooms into absolute freedom. The choice, as always, rests in the palm of the listener's hand. Wealth is a mental state of mind that begins with the courage to unlearn everything you were taught about money.